Hello everyone, this video is a part 2.
Part two.
This is a sequel to a video I did before about the most common deck building mistakes, so you can check that out as well. I'll put a link in the description, but you don't need to watch it to understand this video, where I'm going to give a basic guide to deck building in Master Duel. Now this video is mostly going to be targeted towards new players, so do bear that in mind if you're more experienced at the game. Be prepped for me to go a bit in depth on seemingly simple concepts. Also, this is not a guide to how the deck I'll be building works overall. It's more so a guide to basic terms and what goes into building. Now, picking out a deck for this video was tricky, so ultimately I opted for this Lyralust Tri-Brigade deck I've been using a lot in Ranked. I wouldn't necessarily recommend this deck to new players. It's very combo focused with lots of different varying end boards. But it provides a lot of great, easy to understand examples for all the different aspects of deck building I wanted to showcase. And I also wanted to showcase another Xyz summoning deck after my previous main Xyz deck. So the first thing you'll want to do is figure out what are your core cards in the main deck. What are the most commonly utilized cards for said deck, and from there, you want to figure out your ratio for the amount of each cards as well as whether or not you want it to be a going first or going second deck. This build I'm making is more so a going first build, though it can go second as well, so we'll work from there. Now the type of cards you want to max out typically are the searchers and combo starters. These are the cards that start your play. So for example, for searchers, we've maxed out on cards that we can use to search out and add the cards we need, such as Cobalt Sparrow, 1-for-1, Bird Call, Fire Formation Tenki, and Nerval, as all of these can be used to get us the ingredients we need in our combo. The only one we don't have maxed out is Wagtail, as she only searches Bird Call in this deck, and if that's already been used, we can't use it again that turn. And we want to avoid redundancies in our plays. We have 3 of Warbler, as she can special summon another Lyralust monster from the hand or graveyard such as Cobalt Sparrow to allow her to search a card. And while we haven't maxed out on some Tri-Brigade monsters, given they all can bring out big monsters, you can have a smaller amount for the rest of them. I have Kit at 2 for instance, as if you have her in hand and nothing else, you can use her to link summon and start the Tri-Brigade combo to start sending other Tri-Brigades to the grave. We also have Karos at 1 because it's easily searchable with Nerval's ability, and it's the only Tri-Brigade monster that doesn't have an effect by sending it to the graveyard. He falls under an important category of card called Extenders. Extenders work exactly as the name would imply. They extend your turn and keep the momentum going, which all the Tri-Brigades do. These are also where the 2 other Lyralust monsters I haven't gone over fall into, as Sapphire Swallow can be summoned with another winged beast monster from the hand like Nerval or any other Lyralusks, and Canary can be summoned by reviving another Lyralust from the graveyard at the cost of only being able to summon Xyz monsters from the extra deck for the rest of that turn. Now you might notice this singular trap card on the list. That is Tri-Brigade Revolt, which falls under the category of defensive cards. Cards that are utilized to protect yourself during yours or your opponent's turn. These fall under several different categories, but the main things we're going to worry about for now are hand traps, quick play spells, and regular traps. So here's the deck list now with our defensive cards. We want to max out on some of the strongest cards such as Max C, Ash Blossom, Crossout Designator, and Call by the Grave. These cards are your best defense when your opponent is setting up their board or when you're setting up yours, with abilities that stop special summoning, stop drawing, adds cards to your hand, etc. Now I bet you more experienced players are wondering why don't I have 3 copies of Max C. Now we have a couple other cards to assist us like Forbidden Droplet, which is an excellent going second card that stops your opponent's monster effects, Cosmic Cyclone to deal with spells and traps, and an Infinite Impermanence, to not only be a good defensive card, but provide fuel for Crossout Designator. Now normally a card in the main deck that's just used as fuel for another card or combo is typically called a Garnet, and you don't typically want to draw into them. A perfect example being the DPE engine, where there are 2 cards in that play you really don't want to draw into. However, in this case it doesn't really count, as Infinite Impermanence is an always useful card while in this build. Now while defensive cards are great, make sure they don't outweigh the cards you need to make your play. Some of these can be easily swapped in or out depending on what's going on in the game right now. For example, I put in Cosmic Cyclone because right now one of the biggest decks is...
Oh, hey babe.
There's also a concept that's fairly important to deck building called a 9-3-6 rule. The basic idea is to typically have 9 starters, 3 drawing cards, 6 extenders, and then 12 going second cards, like hand traps, board breakers, etc. Now this isn't a set in stone rule, and Lyralust is a unique case so it doesn't 100% apply, but in some other decks that are a bit simpler like MathMex, it's a very helpful thing to keep in mind. Next up is an important category to deck building: the boss monsters and win conditions. The boss monsters and win conditions. What are we going to bring out to win us the game? There are plenty of options for this deck, so let's plop them in.
Plop.
Yeah, this deck ain't cheap. You'll notice we only have one monster added to the main deck, Mist Valley Apex Avian. Avian is an amazing Omni Negate, i.e. can negate and destroy any card. So why not have more? Well, simply because we really don't want to draw into him. Instead, we want to use Simmer, Bird of Sovereignty to bring him out. If you draw into him, it's not the worst, but we want room for more defensive cards or combo pieces. The rest of the extra deck is a little more typical. Some great going second monsters, some more searchers and ways of getting the combo started. Now the way you want to pick what monsters you're going to use is to really think about your end game and how you're going to get there. So for this deck, we want our ending board to typically be Utopic Draco Future, Ensemble Robin, Simurg, and Apex Avian. And both our main deck and extra deck accommodates for this with plenty of searchers, extenders, and the like to get us to your final board. Now it's not always going to look like this, so definitely practice a bit and do some research about what kind of monsters you'll get on your end board typically. But for this deck, this is the most ideal one we want to get, as it has one Omni Negate, a monster effect negate in Steel, some protection, and a disruption to special summoning. And there you go, some real power. Thanks to all of my monsters, especially this nice pair of Hooters. And of course I mean both Simurg and Apex Avian, cause they're both birds. Now another thing to note is that at some point, you might have to adapt your deck to whatever the meta or ban list is at that point. So let's say instead of Runics being super popular, it was trap-based decks. You'd want to run Red Reboot to disable your opponent's trap cards. But I doubt that'll happen. Oh. Or alternatively, let's say a card that's important to your combo like Simmer gets banned. You'd probably want to use some other really good winged beast monster. But like that's gonna happen. So you always want to be on the lookout for updates of some kind to be ready. Something else to note is that you're very rarely going to be able to afford the whole deck right away. So if you can, put your crafting materials more so towards the main deck and vital pieces rather than some extra stuff. Or certain extra deck monsters which you might not need right away. And one final note again is, make sure you get some practice in. Your deck is going to go through some growing pains early on, while you figure out how it works, so bear that in mind. Like I said earlier, this deck I'm showing is not one I'd recommend to new players. I just wanted to show more overall what goes into deck building. Anyhow, hope this video helps you out. And if you have some deck building experience, what are some tips you'd like to give to new players? Let me know in the comments, please subscribe, and always remember. Bird is the word, bird is the word.